Rich Galgano, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
All right. Thank you, John.
Down to the Wire is the book. I can't wait to hear some of the stories behind it. This is a crazy tale. So before we get into it, Windy City, you guys supplied wiring. Is that right? Like low voltage wiring. Explain the business model.
Yeah. So the business model was it's plastic insulated copper, for lack of a better example, right? So it's an undifferentiated product. So when I started the business in 1994, I got in the wire business when I was a young kid, just about to turn 21, and got a job as a salesperson. And it was like the Wild West. So most of the deals were done what we call brokering. There wasn't a lot of inventory. You had to know where to go. It was great. It was a very fun business. Loved it. God, once wire gets in your veins, it's hard to get out of it.
And you're selling copper wire to construction projects, right? Like if I need to,
yes.
I got a house or a building, I want to wire up. It's all the kind of plumbing. It's not literally plumbing, but it's all the wiring that behind the scenes that connects all the devices.
All 100%. And you could get a call one day and it's an industrial plant and they need what's called XLP, PVC high, a very strange cable. And you have to know that you got to call this company in South Carolina because they'll have it in stock. And then you got to get a trucking company there and you got to ship it from point A to point B. It was crazy. There was no internet. There was no email. It was fax, phone. I had multiple phones on my desk. There was no CRM. I'm a 21-year-old kid. And being in that business is like injecting, once you inject wire into your blood, it's like probably injecting heroin or some other drug. It gets in you. And, but then the internet, IBM started coming out with this IBM wiring system, and the telephone systems were starting to come into play. And I saw this opportunity in low voltage, and I had a premonition, and my commissions kept getting changed at the place I was at. I was 24 years old, 25. I was making good money. But between the ages of really like 21 and 24, I become this degenerate gambler. And so I was working, and I got addicted to gambling. And I went to my first Gamblers Anonymous meeting. And then what happened was I got some clarity, didn't like who I was working for, what I was doing, thought I could do this better than anybody else. And then lo and behold, started this business that you don't know what to expect from it. Excuse me, you don't know what to expect from it. And, we started out, we were sued by the company I left, some nonsense, but they got great lawyers. And, here I am, 25 years old, 26, just turned 26. And I'm trying to figure out, how do I start this business? These guys are trying to put me out of business. There's no Google to Google, hey, give me the best defense attorney in DuPage County, Illinois. And it was crazy times. And by the grace of God, we figured out a way, me and my partner, Gary Keller, and we did 1.1 million of sales in 9 months. And our accountant came to us, Mike. We originally set up as a C Corp, and Mike's like, Rich, Gary, you guys, we're going to shut the year off now. We're going to go on calendar year. Because we started in November. So he wanted to get us on an LLC basis. So really, we cut our first year in 9 months. Then we went to an LLC. Then we did a 6-month year. Then we went to a year. And every year we've grown the business. And I'll just give you a staggering number. I did sell the business in October of 2020. I still remain the CEO of the company. We are going to be starting our 33rd year in business, November 1st. This will be the 32nd consecutive year of EBITDA growth. So every year we've been in business, we've made more operating income than we have the previous year, even during the GFC of 2008, 2009. Yes, it's
and this is
been a
all
remarkable run.
Selling this low voltage cable to presumably construction workers and building maintenance companies. Like who buys the?
All right. So when we first, obviously when we first started, we were just an unknown, right? So we found a niche market. And then we started in this niche market, was building automation. So today it would be companies like Johnson Controls, Crane, Siemens Building Technologies. Back then they were smaller companies, and they got gobbled up by these larger companies. But Johnson Controls was really in business back then. But We were selling companies that just did heating and cooling for commercial buildings. So high-end control systems. And that was our focus. And then we moved to security. So believe it or not, cameras were just coming to fruition. So cameras and alarm systems and access control, the keypad you see at the door. And then we migrated to fire alarm, and then audio and video and petroleum. And now today we're the largest low voltage company in the United States. We are spec'd in on just about every data center project in the country. So Google, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft. I mean, we're the go-to low voltage wire and cable company, probably the premier, definitely in the United States, if not the world.
Hey, it's John. Look, if you're building to sell, I want to let you know about a resource you may find helpful. It's called the Value Builder Score, and it will evaluate your company in the same way that acquirers will look at your business. It'll give you a score on the 8 factors that drive the value of your company. You'll also get an estimate of value and things you could do to improve that value over time, whether you want to sell now or in a decade from now. Knowing how the movie ends, I think, puts you in the catbird's seat, gives you all kinds of negotiating leverage. So it's available exclusively through a Value Builder advisor. So talk to your advisor. If you don't have one yet, you can go to valuebuilder.com/score. Let us know what industry you're in, and we will connect you with an advisor who specializes in companies like yours. Just go to valuebuilder.com/score. And you started this business with your partner, Gary. How did you guys divvy up the equity?
50-50. We were 50-50 partners, and Gary was great. I needed Gary to start the business. He was a great sounding board. He handled a lot of the operational stuff. I was driving the sales, the vision, and I really took forefront in the lawsuit because I knew all the bodies were buried. So yeah, with the old company. So it was great. We never had an issue. I mean, it was really one of those cases where it was like, Gary, just, you know what? Do what you got to do. Just trust me, let me do what I have to do, and we will get this thing to, where we want it. We didn't know where we wanted to go. I think by the third year, we were each making $1 million a year. We were not even 30 years old. And you never dream that when you start this thing. And, there was more money than we thought we were ever going to have.
And did you guys have a shotgun clause, like in the event that you had a disagreement? Did you have a shotgun in place, or how was your legal structure set up between you as 50-50 partners?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we did not have that clause. We never I suggest to young entrepreneurs today that you figure out a way out, because how many marriages end up in divorce? Far too many, right? Your business partner is like picking your wife. You better pick the damn right one. I don't care what stage of the business you're in. Startup phase, you're taking on investors, or you're getting ready to sell, monetize. That is the biggest decision you can make. And we have 12,000 customers at Windy City Wire. A lot of them are independently owned by 1, 2, 3 guys. And I get enough phone calls where one guy's doing all the work, the other guy's dragging behind, they're 50-50. The guy's like, how do I unwind this? It's not right.
Did it ever come to that with Gary? Like, did you guys ever sort of come to a point where it wasn't working out, or one party felt they were getting the raw end of the deal?
No. But when you start making the kind of money we were making at the age we were making, I'm not kidding you. Everything was really rose and what is it? Rose and wine and roses. When you are doing as well as we are doing, right? We were in business, 6 years, and we were getting offered $25 million for our business.
Wow.
So when you're at it, so I can't say that because we never had an issue to have a disagreement about. We knew we had to reinvest in the business. We agreed with that. And because things are going so well and what we did worked, he just said, Rich, just do what you got to do. I'm like, here, this is where we need to go. These are the markets we need to go to. We're going to hire these 5 sales guys. Let's do it. Here's the investment. But when we discuss things, there was always an offering, right? If this doesn't work, how do we exit? So as long as if you're going to make an investment in your business, I'm a firm believer you have to know how long am I willing to ride this for? What am I willing to risk? And then if it doesn't work, when do we pull the plug and what's the off ramp? If you don't do that, you're gonna get sucked dry. But if you do that, go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you guys have an off ramp for the business? I guess what I'm asking, a lot of folks build a company with a view to sell it. Like the ultimate goal is to sell it. Others, want to pass it on to their kids or bring on a next generation of managers. Like, what did you have an end game in mind back in those days?
I don't think we did. Okay. I think me and Gary were at 2 different places. So when we had our first monetization event in 2006, we both divested about 30% of our holdings. So we each owned 50-50. It was a 40. We went from owning 50% to owning each 50%, each owning 33%. So that would have been what? We divested 34% of our holdings. And then an opportunity came across in 2007, and Gary pretty much sold out the rest of his equity to our equity partners. So Gary Gary owned 3.5 or 4%, and then he stayed on with that percentage until we sold the whole thing in 2020. But me and Gary were at 2 different places. I wasn't ready to sell in 2007 or 2008, the majority of my equity.
And we talk a lot about picking your partners correctly. One of the things to think about, I think, in retrospect, is like a big age gap or big wealth gap. When you start a partnership can be a problem, right? Because one, you reach the point where you want to sell at a later stage or an earlier stage, depending on your age and your wealth experience. How were you and Gary sorted? Like, were you a similar age and stage, or were you kind of wildly different?
Yes. So Gary was 3 or 4 years older than me. We both gotten married roughly at the same time. We both got married after we started the business. He started having children before me. Gary had 4 daughters. I ended up having 5 children. And I just think that number that was thrown out, so I'll give your audience it's an idea. So our first monetization event, we sold 33% of our company at a $43 million valuation. So it was like a $13.5 million check, right? So we each got $6.5 million in 2006. And, I'll never forget, we're leaving our attorney's office after signing all the papers. And back then it wasn't DocuSign. You're in this giant conference room. There's a table a mile long, and I was the signee. And you're signing 5 copies of everything, and there's 100 documents. So we get done, we go down to the basement, and there's an ATM machine sitting there, and Gary puts his ATM card in, and he spits out the receipt, and it just showed the deposit. It's like $6.5 million. And he hands me the receipt, and he says, "Did you ever think you'd see this much effing money in your lifetime?" And I think that was a turning point. And the reason why we did that, we're a couple of years removed from 9/11, right? 2001. And there was always this, and 100% of our net worth was tied up in our business. We did have some stocks, but we were reinvesting in the business. And I think 9/11 had a very big impact on Gary, because he saw, hey, if a dirty bomb drops, if this happens and I'm not diversified, we could get wiped out, right? And I think that was really the big driving factor on the monetization. And then a year and a half later, our value went from 43 million to 72 million. So the equity partners that we partnered with, which were spectacular and wonderful, still dear friends today, they offered a valuation of 72 million. I didn't sell. And then Gary elected to divest like 95% of his equity at that value. And he went and did other things. I mean, he's always been a part of the company, but he wanted to Gary's a big comic book collector, art collector, and
Buy a lot of comics.
Yeah, he buys a lot of comics. And I will share this with the audience. So what happened with that dynamic then was the board, right? So all of a sudden, me and Gary we no longer own 66% of the company. Now it was, I got 30 whatever percent, Gary's got 4%, the equity group's got 60%. So I negotiated a deal with them that said I still control the board and I would relinquish board control if I ever failed to not grow the business. Basically, as long as the business was growing, I made the decisions, I controlled the board, and they agreed to that. And obviously, that's the way it was. So
wow,
it worked out good for me because if I lost control, and I think they were smart enough to know that if I wasn't going to be in control, that I would just go to them and say, well, then give me my money as well. And because I really was running the business. And I think your audience understands this. Even though the business is an innate object, it's nothing, right? It's paper. But a good business takes on the personality of the founder. And it has a life of its own. The first business I worked for, total dysfunction. The owner was in dysfunction, in chaos. The business was in dysfunction and chaos. If you are stable, your business will be stable. So the business, and I was, a very intense individual, always striving for customer satisfaction, have to be the best. How do we go from point A to point B? So I think they were excited to say, if this guy's got enough confidence to say, I'm not giving this up unless I fail, says a lot. And I think it's important for your audience out there to know, try never to relinquish your ability to operate the business the way you see fit. Should you ever monetize and still retain a small portion of your business would be my suggestion.
Yeah, this is really fresh territory for us because we haven't explored this a lot. But so when you brought in a minority equity investor, the first monetization in 2006, some people might confuse a venture capital round where the money is being brought in to fuel the business's growth, and a minority recapitalization, which sounds like what you did, where the money is basically being put into the founder's genes so you can diversify.
100%.
Maybe walk through, because a lot of people hear, oh, they raised money. They assume that money is to go towards growing the business. Like, how did you get money to take some chips off the table? Did you say that up front, your goal in selling this tranche of equity was to do that, not grow the business, but to basically pay yourselves?
Yeah. So a business relies on working capital to grow, which is your inventory and your receivables, minus your payables, really your work. What is required for that business to grow? So our business was at working capital mass. We knew what the working capital was, and our growth and our profit margins allowed us, even with paying our taxes, to reinvest that into working capital. So we didn't need money to grow the business. Didn't need it. We felt it was prudent, with me on the way to having my 5th child and Gary just having his 4th child, that if we had that dirty bomb moment, we needed some level of security for the family. That was it. It was a means to diversify.
And you told investors that.
Oh, 100%. Yes. So, and you run the gamut. We started really this process probably in 2002 and 2003. So for your audience, I will tell you 99% of everybody that came in, there were 2 options for us. Either sell the entire company, and these would be like our larger competitors. They wanted to buy all the stock. Maybe we would get some stock in their company, or they would be these. Since we were small at the time, smaller private equity firms, and they would be coming in with what's called an LBO, a leveraged buyout, okay? Where they look at your earnings, your EBITDA, they go to a bank, they lever up 3 or 4 times your debt. So let's say you're making $1 million a year, they'll go to a bank and borrow 3.5 million. And let's say they're going to offer you $6 million for your business. They'll turn around, they'll write $1.5 million check. They'll tell you, take $1 million of your dollars, roll it as either equity or note. And for us at that time, that structure was horrible. It didn't work. We were basically going to become indentured servants. So we were going to sell at whatever, 85% of our business, retain 15%, go on a salary, and really work for the private equity firm. And I couldn't wrap my head around that model. That model just didn't work for me.
Rich, do it more slowly, because
okay.
I'm a bit obtuse. So let's go slowly through that, because I think a lot of our listeners right now are getting those calls from private equity groups. So the call you were getting from a private equity group, just walk me through it more slowly one more time. Explain to me what the model was and it was not going to work for you. Okay.
So what happens is the equity group comes in, whether you have an investment banker engaged or not. A lot of times they'll call you, they'll get the owner, and the owner will, oh, sure, I'll take a phone call. And they'll come in and they'll give you a value. Hey, we're going to value your business at $7 million, let's say. You got $1 million of EBITDA. And you're like, wow, $7 million, okay, this is great. And then they will then present the structure to you. And the structure will look something like this. The company will have bank debt. So typically a PE-backed firm, they have lenders they will have better access to capital through banks than typically a small business owner will. That's just the way the world works. So a sponsor, we call them sponsors, they can go to a bank and get 3.5 times or 4 times leverage, meaning that $1 million, a bank will give them $4 million to loan against. They may look at the assets, the inventory, the receivables, but they're really looking at cash flows of the business to sustain that, to support that debt. So they use that $4 million to pay the owner, and then they'll write maybe a $2 million check out of their wallet. And then they'll leave $1 million out there for the owner to roll as equity or to be paid back as a note payable. So a lot of times they're going to need the business owners to stay on unless for an X amount of period of time so they can get someone in place. But they're going to milk that business. So that $4 million note to the bank is going to take up a lot of the cash flow. They're going to have to pay principal back and interest. They're going to pay interest to the note holder. So you're the business owner, you're going to leave $1 million in. They might pay you an 8% note, so you're going to get $80,000 in interest plus your salary. And then the equity firm is going to take a management fee. Might be 15%, might be 10%, might be 4%, but they're going to take some money out of that business. And then they're going to hope that that business grows so they can take that leverage ratio down. So if they borrowed $4 million and they can take that EBITDA from 1 million to 2 million, they're no longer at 4 times leverage, they're at 2 times leverage. So they get that leverage down, they free up more cash flow. So the leveraged buyout works with businesses that are growing, meaning they got a growth rate 9, 10, 15, 20%.
But you guys were growing. How come it wasn't attractive to you? That's what I'm trying to get.
Okay, here's why it wasn't attractive to us. Yeah. They were going to take a management fee that was pretty much equal to what I was getting paid. My upside was limited. And we essentially, meaning me and Garrett, were the ones borrowing from the bank, not them. So
you were going to guarantee that debt personally?
No, well, not really, but I could have went to a bank and got that leverage and put that money in my pocket. So we could have maybe got half of that amount with bank debt. and put it in our pocket and still owned 100% of our company. So what happens in a leveraged buyout when you are the business owner? The term I like to use is you really become an indentured servant. So either you're rolling equity, and then you feel like, oh my God, I got 10 or 20% tied up in this thing. You're working for that 20%. Granted, you've taken some chips off the table, but it's hard to unwind it, because then you're working for that private equity group. Let's say you double that business. Then they want to sell it. Okay. Now you're going to get another bite with that 20% you own, but the new buyer is going to come in. There'll be another private equity firm. What do you think they're going to want? They're going to want you to stay on. So now you're going to roll again and roll again. And unless you have a really good management team put in place, been my experience, it's hard for these guys ever to get out. And they run you ragged and work you like a dog. They really do. You lose your independence unless you get the right freaking partner.
And so for you and Gary, you wanted more independence. You're like, I don't need your debt. I can get my own debt. But you did want to take some chips off the table. So it was a second deal structure. Explain that.
So, and this was extremely rare in 2005, 2006. We actually got a phone call from a gentleman by the name of David Hollis. And Gary's talking to him, and Gary said, look, we've been down this block. If you can find us a buyer, here are our terms. Our terms is they come in para passu. So that means they're equal. If we take a distribution, they take a distribution. This is not going to be a deal where they come in, leverage the shit out of the company, get bank debt. This is going to be, they put money in, their own money. We take that money out, and then we are equal partners. So in essence, it was a third, and a third of the time. So if we took $1 million distribution, Gary got 333, I got 333, and they got 333. And there was a group out of California. It was called Seidler Equity Partners. They're phenomenal. So these were the grandchildren of Walter O'Malley, the same Walter O'Malley that moved the Brooklyn Dodgers to LA. So the family basically owned the Dodgers. And Bob Seidler, his father, Roland, he started one of the first equity groups, private equity groups, back in the 1960s or 70s. His father was like a legend in the business. He was way ahead of the curve in this private equity. So Bob and then Kevin O'Malley, his cousin, they came out and met me and Gary the day after Thanksgiving in Chicago, went to the office and talked about structure. We all liked each other. And within 4 weeks, I think we had a signed LOI, and in maybe 8 weeks, we had funding and we were done. And, we remained business partners with them for 15 years.
And you told these guys, look, I got 4 kids, 1 on the way. I need to settle up my own personal balance sheet here. I need to kind of take some chips off the table. So they weren't thinking you were going to take the money and pour it into the business. They knew that you were selling some equity and you're going to do with that what you wanted to.
Yeah.
Got it. That makes sense.
And that was their model. Their model was to take minority interest in founder-led businesses that wanted to grow their business. So they had a unique private equity model, and they have done. They're one of the best performing funds in the country. They don't take. It's very hard to get into that fund, and their result, because they pick the right partner, and they tend to not buy majority interest. They want minority because, again, they know they're not capable of running a business. They want to invest in the people that will help them and their LPs grow their investments.
And they came in at a $43 million valuation. What multiple of EBITDA would that have been roughly?
Back then, multiples were much lower than they are today. That probably was maybe a 7.5 or 8 times. I think we were just a little bit north of 5 million of EBITDA. Yeah, so it was probably in the 8 range, and it was an A+ business. A+ businesses back then got 8.5 times. That was it.
Okay, Rich, you're blowing my mind here. Hold on a second. You're like 30 something years old.
Yeah.
you own half of, before you do this deal, a company worth $43 million. Okay.
Yeah.
Like 99 out of 100 people would have been like, awesome. I'll take my half of $43 million and I'm going to the beach at 30 something years old or whatever you were at the time. You were a young guy. What made you, okay. Like, were you at all tempted to just like take the money?
Never.
Come on.
Never.
Rich,
never.
Come on. Really?
Never. The thought never even crossed my mind. I only use that as I don't even want a point of leverage. It was just a point of discussion. I'm like, guys, I have to retain control here. And if not, then the same check you wrote to Gary, write to me. And they're like, no, we'll give you no. I mean, I have been so fortunate in my life for most of my businesses and most of the opportunities that have been presented to me to partner with the right people. Now, I've done a lot of deals. Some deals go bad. Some deals go real bad. And they go bad because of the people, not because of the business. So, no, I never thought about at that point selling the business because I didn't see it going backwards. You know, it was a super diversified business. You know, our top customer didn't represent more than 1 or 2% of our business. It's an ideal business from a customer concentration standpoint, margin standpoint, barriers to entry. We had some IP, we got some patents. We took a differentiated product or an undifferentiated product and differentiated it. Our service levels were unbelievable. I had a great young sales team. I had great management. Never crossed my mind.
How did you differentiate low voltage cabling? It sounds like the hardest thing to differentiate on the planet.
It is. I tell people, and this is a joke, and I don't mean to make light of suicide at all, but I used to tell people, if you have two choices in life, to sit in a bathtub and slit your wrist or sell plastic insulated copper, sit in a bathtub because it's a lot less painful. So when we started the business, I tell the story in the book. If anybody knows anything about the wiring in your house, if you look at a light switch, there's a green wire, a white wire, a red wire, and a black wire for the most part. And those wires are used to differentiate HOTS and lead and ground wires, right? Because we don't want anybody to get electrocuted. If all those wires were the same color, people would be put at risk, okay? So they did that for a reason. At that point, low voltage wire was basically one color. Yet they were used in multiple applications, multiple devices, multiple termination points, just like that outlet at your wall. And I said to myself, why don't we make low voltage wire in colors? And there were some companies doing it in a very limited fashion, let's say. And I thought this should be expanded. And I remember I went to the guy that was running the company I was working for at the time. And this is in May, I believe May of 1994. And he said, that's a stupid idea. I said, okay, stupid idea. He said, I got to increase my working capital because if I have one color, I only need 10 boxes of an item. But if I have 4 colors, I might need 40 boxes and I might not sell anymore. Okay, so I get where he was coming from. So I took this idea and I put it in my back pocket. And then when I knew I was going to be leaving the company to start Windy City Wire, this really started in September of 1994. I said, this is the product that I'm going to change the world with. I'm going to do this. We're going to do it right. We're going to do multiple jacket colored stripes. We're going to be able to differentiate analog circuits from binary circuits from
just
digital
because
circuits.
Of colors.
Because of colors.
But couldn't your competitors just color, like as soon as you got traction, couldn't they just come up with the colors?
They sure could, but by that time, you know, you blink your eyes and you go from, and this was not a massive market at the time. I think we did 1 million, 3 million, 7 million our third year. And that was basically one market. And we were beginning to own that building automation market. And by the time people stood up and took notice, we were just, it was just too hard to catch us. And
you were on the next market.
Yeah, and this is not field of dreams. This is not build it and they will come. This is build it, amplify it, sell it, get the message out, service, and then they will come. So this wasn't just like put it on the shelf and it's going to fly off the shelf. It was work. It was about training your sales force, teaching them how to sell it, how to sell the customer, how to explain it to the customer, because this was new to, if the customers didn't know who we were, this was new to them as well. They're like, wait, I'm going to color code my installations. And we're like, yeah, you're going to color code your installations. And guess what? It's going to save you termination time. It's going to save you service call time. And it's going to allow you to stand out with your customers so they know that you can then differentiate what you've installed in their building from somebody else. So,
love it.
And then as that started progressing, then we started focusing on service, and we would do these guarantees like, hey, we know we have inventory. We know we can service you, Mr. Customer. So here's what we're going to do. If our top, let's say 100 items, if we don't ship this item today from inventory, you don't pay for it. So now we were putting service guarantees. We were looking for more ways to differentiate ourselves, more ways to make doing business easy. So people couldn't say no. They had to say yes. And over time, John, we developed this saying was, they're not a customer yet. Once you plant that seed, I would leave a meeting. I'd be like, 6 months, this will be closed. They have to realize they're breaking up with their girlfriend. They know they're breaking up with their girlfriend, but they need a little more time. And that was the philosophy we had. And then in 2007, we had a breakthrough discovery with a packaging methodology that revolutionized the way wire and cable would be pulled from 2008 up really through today. And it's a product called the Rack Pack, which we patented. It was a simple box with a hole in it with these wires on racketeers. So we took a newer concept and radically changed it and made it the greatest wire and cable dispensing product ever created. And it's so simple, it's brilliant. And I spent 4.5 years fighting the patent office until we got a patent on the product. And the story in the book it probably doesn't do the story justice. I ended up flying to Virginia with my attorney, and it was like an episode out of The Sopranos where I'm like basically shaking down the patent officer saying, William Rivera, like, dude, everyone's ripping me off, and they're only ripping me off because you keep refusing my patent. And he looks at me, and I knew he was going to say this because all the denials have been the same, that this is blatantly obvious. This is so obvious. What we did, I don't have a box here, but we basically took a box of wire and we ran a hole through the arm hole. Anybody's seen an electrician, they take a spool of wire, they run a rod through it, they put it on a racketeer or a ladder or whatever, the wires spins off the spool. We put the spool in the box, in racketeers, and we put a hole in the box so then someone could put boxes side by side, run a rod through it, link them together, create mass, and then we created these hand trucks and carts that the boxes would fit on. So basically, it was a makeshift wire rack that was the greatest one ever created. And he looks at me and he says, Rich, but this is so obvious. And I looked at him and I said, Jorge, how long has wire been pulled for? It said, I don't know. I said, about 100 years. I said, it's so effing obvious that this took 100 years to create. That's when I had him. The light bulb went off, and I said, Jorge, me and Perkins, that was my attorney, Jeff Perkins, I said, we're leaving. Now, here's what's going to happen. You are going to approve this patent because, 1, it's not obvious. 2, you know it's the right thing to do. And 3, you are going to you're going to let me stop letting people rip me off. And within a week from when we got back, he had issued the patent. Awesome. I am not bullshitting you. It was, and he shows up an hour late for the meeting. And I had this cart with me, these wire boxes, and we're sitting in the patent office. And he says, oh, you must be the wire guy. And I was so infuriated because he thinks his time is more valuable than mine. And I said to him, if I was going to lose this battle, I was going to lose it on my terms. I said, you must be the guy that shows up an hour late for a meeting guy.
That's how you started?
Oh, yeah. we were in this little office. This office probably was 5 by 5. We got this part. My patent attorney sitting in this chair. I'm standing up, and I'm like, dude, what's going on here? And I brought up my 5 kids, and I'm like, you're letting people steal the food out of my children's mouth. And but we got the patent, and it's been that was a rocket ship. That was a
Awesome. Okay,
rocket.
so you managed to differentiate basically one of the hardest things to differentiate, a commoditized service. So I think anybody can take that with a tremendous lesson. So let's walk through 2012, because off mic, we were talking about a failed process. And I think there's a lot of lessons for our listeners in that. Maybe walk through, where you were at with the business, what caused you to want to take it to market, and what happened next.
Okay. All right. So when we sold the company in 2006, so when you sell your business to private equity, there'll be a fund. There'll be a fund number, fund 5, fund 7, whatever the fund is. It's really, my suggestion to your audience would be understand what the fund is that's investing in if you are selling to private equity, what is the fund number, what is the lifespan of the fund? These funds tend to run 8, 9, 10 years. So that means
but you didn't sell to private equity.
Yes, we did. We sold the Cyber Equity was a private equity fund. They just had a different model. Ben?
I'm sorry.
A different model.
It was a private equity fund. Okay, got it.
Yes, that was run by the family of the O'Malley family and the Cyber family.
Got it. So please continue. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really, my suggestion would be understand what's the life remaining of the fund. So what happened was in 2012, the fund was coming to an end, meaning they really needed to monetize those investments, which is sell them. So we engaged what's called an investment banker. Okay. This is really important for anybody that might have a business that is going to be required to use an investment banker through the sale process. This is a very sketchy, I find it to be a very sketchy universe. And I don't like to be negative on anything. It's a needed service, which it's important that you partner with the right people. So an investment banker, the process works, you'll interview these companies and they'll create what's called, an offering memorandum. So they'll sit down and talk about your business with you. Their goal obviously is to help you sell your business and maximize your exit, right? I found that the first time, the numbers, everything was exaggerated. Meaning, if I said my growth rate is 8%, they would tell people our growth rate is 12%. If they would say we're going to grow in markets that we weren't even focused on. They were trying to create an illusion of a business that was far different than the business that we had today or the business that it was going to be tomorrow.
Where were you at the time, Rich, in terms of profitability? Like what revenue, profitability? What would you say your numbers were?
We were probably 2010. I think we were probably close to 10 million of EBITDA, 10 to 11 million of EBITDA, and maybe 80 million of revenue or 75 million of revenue.
Okay, and it's at the time it's you owning a third. Seidler has to exit their position, and then you had another equity partner, I believe.
Gary had 4% still. Gary probably would have exited. And we were expecting. We must have been higher. We must have been 12, maybe 12. We were expecting a valuation of about $135 million. That's what we were expecting to sell the company for. But this process, as I'm looking at what they're creating, I was getting infuriated. I'm like, guys, this is bullshit. You're going to sell this company and move on, and I'm going to sell this company, and I'm going to have to work with these guys. And if this sim is bullshit, they're going to think that I'm a bullshitter. And you have two things in life. You have your family and your reputation, and that's it.
But aren't you giving them the numbers to put in the sim?
Oh, I sure am. 100% I am. And they're creating, and anybody can read about this whole process in the book. They are creating, they're taking things, they made a hockey stick, right? They do this hockey stick to try to get business excited. Most people can read through it, but I'm just a firm believer that you have to be transparent and honest. And I'm also a believer that if you're going to sell your business, you need to give the next buyer, and I want to avoid the word need, the next buyer must have runway to grow the business. If you know your business is at peak, and I know there's that caveat into a buyer beware, but you know your business is here and then it's going to do this, and you don't inform the buyer of that, I know it's their responsibility to do their diligence, but they're not going to know everything. I just think karma plays out. So if I'm going to sell the business, I want everyone to win. I want me to win on the way out, and I want them to have runway to grow the business, especially if I'm going to stay on and run the business. But anyways, what happened was this was a shit show from the start. The investment banker, we did not see eye to eye. I finally got them to fix everything. By that point, my belief in them had been tarnished. I didn't believe in the process. I wasn't happy with them. And it turns out, just as they created this sim that was, lack of a better term, bullshit, till we fixed it, their estimated value of our business was overinflated for us to engage with them. Okay. So you interview these investment bankers, and they're supposed to come in and they'll give you, hey, we think we can get this for your business. Here's the buyer pool and these things. So it was a horrible process. We ended up only with one, I wouldn't even call it a legitimate offer. We ended up with one offer at about the $110 million range. And we pulled the plug. We were not going to sell the business at that. It was horrible. It was a horrible experience. And we decided, hey, we would wait a few years and we would try this again.
So I'm assuming, just before we go to the next story, the investment banker, if I'm reading between the lines here, is trying to kind of juggle a few different masters. On one hand, they've got Rich, who's going to end up holding the bag for whatever commitments they make, right? So you're like incentivized to not overstate what's possible. However, you've also got Seidler, sophisticated private equity, very, very long-standing, who are probably, if I'm getting it right, whispering in the ear of the M&A professional saying, hey, I know Rich wants to say X, but really the big opportunity is Y. So because they're going to hit the bid and leave. Like Seidler's gone. So they're probably whispering in the ear of the M&A guy saying, hey, let's jack this up a little bit.
Right.
Rich is good.
So John, that's a great observation. But in this case, with the equity partner I had, they were with me.
Okay.
I drove. They're unbelievable.
What would the incentive be for the M&A professional to like artificially inflate your number? Like that seems like strange.
Well, because they want the engagement, and a lot of times, what happens is they'll say, "Look, we know it's going to be 110, and there's no way they're going to walk away from 110. So let's tell them it's going to be 130. Let's get them to sign the contract with us, because then we'll get our commission when we sell the business." And this goes on all the time. Now, the other thing you've got in this business is, okay, they're selling our business, right? They're selling it to a buyer. Someone has to buy the business. So you have two entities on this exchange. This is where it gets interesting. So the buyer pool over here is going to be what? Another private equity fund. Okay, it's not going to be some individual writing 110 million, 120, 130 million. It's going to be a fund, a sponsor fund. Now, these sponsor funds, John, what do you think they have a service for in the future? They have what today? They hold businesses today, correct?
Sure.
Because they've got a fund of money. They might buy 10 businesses. What do you think they have to do? They have to then sell some businesses in this fund, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so now you've got a quid pro quo here. The investment banker might know that this PE firm has asset A that needs to be sold. They may say, you want Windy. I will put you in a position to get Windy at the price you need, but in return, I want this asset to sell. It's a really snaky, seedy freaking business, okay? It's unspoken, but it happens, and I know it happens. And again, us as sophisticated business owners need to understand this. Okay? I wasn't privy to that in 2012. Okay? I got a lot smarter in 2014 when we went through the process again.
Tell me
Um,
about that. What happened?
so, all right. So we didn't do the deal in 2012 because there was no deal to be had and continue to grow the business. So now the fund is really coming to an end. We have two choices. We can go to market today, which is 2014, 2013, it's 2014, or we can wait 9 months and go to market in the second half of 2015. So I'm not going to mention the name, but we brought an another investment banking firm in because we were not going to use the other one. And I asked them point blank, all of us were in a room, and I said, we just went to market 2 years ago. We had a failed process. The same companies that you are going to go out to, that we went out to 2 years ago, we're going to go out today. And this is like the girl on a dating app who's beautiful, but she hasn't had a date, or people are going to wonder, why is she back out in the market 2 years later? She's beautiful, she looks good, but she must be rotten on the inside. So I was really concerned that we were going back out to market too soon. Well, this investment banking firm, no doubt they wanted the engagement. And they pitched us and said, let us do some research. Then came back a week, 2 weeks later. No issues here. I was really skeptical. Okay, valuation they came in at 165 million to 185 million. Okay, so great. We could live with this range, 165 to 185. We could transact a deal at that range. Well, lo and behold, the same shit that I dealt with the first time, after me explicitly stating to these guys, this is what cannot happen. Lo and behold, they build this CIM, Confidential Information Memorandum. Okay, it's the same shit that the other group's doing.
The hockey stick growth.
Hockey stick, all these markets that are buzzwords, and I had to sit down with them and say, stop. We're not doing this. So we remedied this. We fixed this. So we go out and get the book out there. We get a little bit of interest. We get interest from maybe 2 or 3 private equity groups.
What are you doing at this point? You think it's worth 160? Where you at?
Maybe 16 million, growing at 10, 15% a year. And we got a price. We got one legitimate offer at 135 million. Now, I am almost certain that the following conversation took place. I don't have proof, but my instinct tells me the investment banker called this private equity firm and said, the Seidlers have to get out. They were done. We had to transact. We were done. Okay? They have to get out. Galgano's got no options. So it came in at $135 million, 30 million below the price. And this was going to be an LBO, leverage buyout, like I explained first time. So we got the writing and offer. We got the offer in writing. And I remember it was December 23rd. And the investment banker called me in the morning and it's like, hey, congratulations. I'm like, congratulations for what? Well, you got a good number. I said, well, it's not the number you told me we were going to get. And I was not happy. And I said to him, I have options. I said, you call them back and they got to come up a minimum of $30 million. I said, they have two options. They come up 30 million or I'm not rolling a penny. I'm keeping all my stock. And if I would have kept my stock, which was valued at 36 million at that price, I would have been the controlling shareholder because they wanted to leverage it up. They're like, no way. He only gets to keep. They wanted me to keep 10% of the equity because they knew they were stealing this company. And I'm like, bullshit. I keep all of my stock. Then they can pay this price. I don't care. Then I'm thinking I'm buying this company for cheap, right? And that's the other thing I think is really important for the listener to understand. When you are selling your business, but you're also retaining ownership in your business. Okay, this is where, you're civil here. 2%. You are the buyer and you're the seller. What does the buyer want to do? The buyer wants to buy the asset at the lowest possible price. The seller wants to sell it at the highest possible price. So when you're both, you have a conflict of interest. So you have to learn to balance the pros and cons of buying it at the low price, but selling it at the high price. And it's something.
So explain that to the mathematically dim in the room here. So so they offer 135. You're like, you got to come up 30 million to 165. You own 30%, and so that's, you figure out it's worth about 36 million. You would not have explain. So you would have, a Seidler would have been able to get out at that price.
Yep.
They would have been able to take, but you wouldn't have rolled you wouldn't have sold any of your equity. So then you would have continued to own a third of the equity.
So 33% of 135 million is what? $42 million. So they were going to leverage the business up 5.5 times, which means they were going to borrow $80 million, which means they only needed to write a $55 million equity check. Okay. So if I own 42 million, I own 90% of the company. They could only write a $10 million check. I was being real difficult. Okay. Because I was not going to give my company away. Even though I only own 33%, this was my company. I built it. I founded it. I run it. It was my vision. Okay? So I got on. I remember, and I told Bob, I have to mention his name. Called the investment bank. I said, I got options. I said, I'll just buy the company back. I said it. I had no means. I hadn't even thought about that yet. And I remember I picked up the phone and I called Bob Simon. And I said, Bob, this is bullshit. This price is not the right price. I'm not.
Sorry, remind me who Bob is. Oh, he's the guy.
So Bob decided he runs the equity, right?
Got it.
And Bob's like, you want to buy the company back? And I said, I certainly do want to buy the company back. He said, that's music to my ears. He said, I will buy it with you. He goes, we had a bona fide offer in writing, okay? So he could take it to his equity, the people in the fund, and say, here's our offer. Galgano does not want to sell. I want to buy it back with him. Anybody that wants to, anybody that's in the group, we had to give them an opportunity to reinvest in moving forward. Otherwise, we were buying everybody out at 135 million. So this is how great of a partner I had. Rather than saying, you got to take the deal, you got to take the offer, we have to get out, he's looking out for my interest and his interest. You don't find this in business partners. That's why I've been blessed.
But okay, I'm lost. So he wants to sell his, because he's in a fund and every fund has a time horizon, right?
Yeah.
So he's got to sell his tranche, right? So he's got to sell his tranche in one fund.
Yep.
Are you saying that he was going to re-up in a second fund with a different time horizon? Is that
no personal money? We were going to put our own personal money. We were not going to do this in a fund. We were going to raise this money with a group of individuals and we did end up picking up one private equity fund. So we actually dubbed this the Great Buyback because we bought the company back. But anyways, going back, so I called Bob. I said, Bob, I want to buy it back. He said, I will get this done. We will get this done. You call the gentleman at the other company that was going to make the offer, and you tell him this is the deal. So I picked up the phone. I called the principal of the private equity group that had offered us 135 million, and I said, you got two choices. You come up significantly, or I roll all my equity. And he said, none of that's going to happen. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to buy the company back. Really, really pleasure doing business with you. Got to know you. Thank you. He was a great guy. And I get what he was doing. He thought based on what the investment banker told him, they had to sell. There was no way I was going to come up with $135 million to buy the company. And I have no doubt there was a quid pro quo here that they were going to get these other businesses to sell. This business I had was a gem. It was a gem. So the Seidlers, they put together, they got the bank because we had to raise $135 million, right? So I rolled just about all my equity. So now we had to figure out where we're going to get the money, how much leverage are we going to put on the business, meaning how much money are we going to borrow. And because I had them backing me, this family, we were able to go out and raise $85 million from institutions. One West Bank, Madison Capital out of Chicago, and then we got some sub debt. So we really had 85 million in debt, and we wrote a $50 million equity check. I think I took $10 million off the table in that deal, and I rolled 26 million. Then there was another 24 million raised. So we raised 50 million, 26 million was mine. And at that point, I owned 52% of the company and controlled it.
Did you personally guarantee the debt?
No, I did not. Nope.
Just the business guaranteed the debt effectively.
The business did. Now, this is a great story. The bank, and this saved my life. This is where there is a higher power. And part of the deal with the bank was I had to get a life insurance policy for the bank because they knew I ran the business. Do this life insurance policy, and they find that I have a severe heart ailment. And if this wasn't detected, I would be dead, probably in 6 months. I ended up having cardiomyopathy, congestive heart failure, and it was picked up in this life insurance exam because I was asymptomatic. So if I would have done the deal with the other group, I would have never done that life insurance test, and I probably would have dropped dead within 6 months. And so there is a lot of unbelievable things that occurred because of that event.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it does make me question again. I'll go back to where I was back in 2006. Here you are, you get this medical diagnosis that you've got a very serious medical condition, and you've got 30, 40, 50 million dollars worth of equity in this business, depending on how you count it. Like, isn't there a part of you that says, I've done my part here. I'm going to step off this roller coaster and spend time with my family. Did that not occur to you at all?
So I had a great management team in place. Now you remember, the Seidlers knew me, so they knew what kind of business we had. They've been partners with me at this point 8 years, 9 years maybe. And then we took another partner on North Star Capital out of Minnesota, this guy Scott Decker, gem of a human being, just unbelievable. And I told him, I said, guys, I have to leave. I have to take time off. I took 6 months off of work. I did not take one phone call off the business. I did not look at any of the numbers. I relied on the management team. They did a phenomenal job. And I lost about 50 pounds. I worked really hard at reversing this heart issue. It turned out it was caused, believe it or not, by Monster energy drinks. I was consuming 3 energy drinks a day, and my heart swelled up like a balloon, wasn't pumping right. I did some valve damage. I developed AFib that developed over time, which I fixed through ablation. But there are 2 chapters in the book where I talk about discovering this and then really how I beat it. So I'm 11 years past this diagnosis by all aspects other than my leaky valves. I have a fairly normal heart. It doesn't imperil me at all, and it's something's going to kill us. I think I'll outlive my heart disease. So, and it's really not heart disease. My arteries are good. I just destroyed my heart from chemicals, and but it's all good now. I live a normal life.
So, okay. So then let's touch briefly on the final transaction, which is the 2020 transaction. So you own the business back along with your partners. Tell me about the final transaction, which was, I guess you sold it to a strategic diploma, right?
Yeah, we sold it to a publicly traded company out of the UK. So we had just gotten through all the COVID. We were going through the COVID shit, and I was going to be 52 years old, maybe 53. And we had this event. My father died in 2018. And then we had this event in 2019 celebrating the 25th anniversary of the company. And I had this gala event at Navy Pier in Chicago. Toby Keith played it, thousands of people there. And I just felt like I had I had done everything I needed to do with this business. Where else was I gonna take it? You're right. And I just felt like the time was right to turn the business over. My kids really didn't have much of an interest of doing this. Um, and it was an easy, hard decision because, like we talked about earlier, it's an inanimate object. But I had run that business for 50% of my life. So 1 out of every 2 days I've been alive, I've been in that business. So I've been through the process multiple times. We needed to do it. We needed to get an investment banker because of the size of the transaction, and there was going to be a lot of things going on. And a while, somebody mentioned me this company, Diploma, out of the UK, and I had to make a decision. If I was going to sell the company, was I going to sell the private equity? Was I going to roll? Was I going to stay on another X amount of years? Or was I going to just sell and exit and get up, right? And have the opportunity to exit in a few years. Because you have to transition the business out. So I pretty much had made my mind up that we were going to do a strategic. I didn't even want to go through the process. I'm 52 years old. I know what I want. And you know what? If we got 20 or $30 million more from another group, is at the point I am in my life, is another $15 million going to change my life one way or the other? The answer was no. So I engaged Diploma basically one-on-one through the help of an investment banker that I did not engage with, but I paid him. Diploma and I both paid him a commission out of the sale of the company. But I really handled the negotiations with the CEO of the company. Now there was some shit that happened once other people got involved. The people that worked for him, they did some stupid things that we had to rectify, messing with the valuation, working capital. They almost blew the deal up. Their attorneys were out of control with the red line. When I say red line, the purchase agreement, they kept marking it up, and the legal bills were getting out of hand. This was a simple transaction that really was a handshake between me and the CEO, who's still CEO, super guy, Johnny Thompson, freaking great guy. And I had offered them 3 years. Just to give you an idea of the relationship. I don't own any of the company anymore. I'm starting my sixth year with the company in October. So they treat me very well, and they let me run the business still, and it's growing. It's doing great. They've done extremely well on their investment, and we ended up doing that transaction just a hair under $500 million.
500, just shy of $500 million.
Yeah.
It's an incredible story. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but I know your time is precious. The book is called Down to the Wire. It's available anywhere you buy books. And I would recommend everyone pick it up if you want a roller coaster journey of a real true story of.
Yep. And I'll throw a little pitch in there. The first week the book was released, it was the USA Today #1 best-selling nonfiction book in the country, and it was the 7th best-selling book overall. So the book is resonating with an audience, and it really chronicles the story of a kid becoming a degenerate gambler, getting help through GA, and then really most of the book is about starting a business, building the business, and then the monetization of it. So anybody that's an entrepreneur thinking about starting a business, this book is I think it's a great book to read.
Down to the Wire is the book. Rich Galgano is the entrepreneur. Thanks for doing this, Rich.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Have a great day.